Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about the 3 biggest secrets of growing your law firm. We are once again joined by our CEO, Hamid Kohan. So we have a really special treat to be able to hear his expertise and wisdom of a lifetime of running companies. And so without further delay, we will get started. So PJ, if you can move to the second slide. We are gonna open up with a quiz, and it is, or a poll rather. So if everyone in the room, the question is, do you think you need a lot of money in order to grow a law firm? Is that a true statement or a false statement? Wow. And Daniel, are the results published? Everyone's able to see that?
Oh, we got a 50-50 almost.
Yeah. So Hamid, comments on that. What do you think about that?
Well, initially when you open up a firm, typically nobody has enough money to really grow the firm at the rate they're expected when they become an attorney or they became a solo practitioner. So my experience is that almost like 85% of the time, there is not enough funding to grow a firm from scratch. And on top of that, there is not enough expertise and business knowledge to, even if you had the funds, to put it into right use. So those folks who even get the funding somehow, what happens is that they are using it for lead generation or different marketing or advertising campaigns, which is not well thought through, and they become a victim of a lead generation program where most of the people I speak with, they say, boy, I really lost a chunk of money trying to do this lead generation, so I'm going to go back to friends and family to get clients. So you don't need a lot of money. And if you have a lot of money, you have to wait and program and plan to spend the money in the right way in the right time. Even the large firms who have tons of resources, they fall into this trap of, I got a lot of money, I just had a huge settlement, so let me go throw it into advertising. Mm-hmm. And half of them also get burned because it's not properly controlled or planned. So what the issue is that people typically feel if they put money into advertising, they should just get cases. And that doesn't work because most of the lead generations that you do, it doesn't matter if it's online or traditional, it takes a certain period of time to see an outcome of those results. When it's well managed, implemented, controlled, tracked, and whatever. So it's not just because you invest the money, you're going to end up with cases. And the people who have spent the money, they can vouch for this, that that's not the way to do it.
Do you think that for practices like personal injury focus, that you can't really always predict when settlements are going to come in or big waves of money? Does that become an extra challenge that maybe doesn't exist in other industries, but then does exist when a law firm is trying to plan growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you some examples. If you're talking about employment, workers' comp, personal injury, consumer protection, property casualty, all of these different practice types, the conversion rate from the leads generated is less than 5%. So basically means you get these 100 leads one way or another through direct calls, emails, texts, whatever. There's a great chance statistically showing that you're going to try to get a hold of 95 people that is either a bad lead, disconnected, don't reply, don't whatever, to get those 5 that you are basically paid for. But it's a very exhausting process to go through that. But you have to be organized, have the resources to contact all of these 100 people to get the 5%. 5% is not a great number. But even if you're getting a 5% conversion from any of this lead generation, you're doing good. But a lot of people end up with a 1 or 2%. But they get exhausted contacting 100 people that 95% of them are not responding or they're not qualified leads.
And so you think that a lot of law firms treat every lead exactly the same, and when they really should analyze if they fall in this box, that if I know I'm going to get a lot of bad leads, learn how to discern when it's a bad lead and move on, don't put the energy.
Right, and they need to have a plan saying that, a lot of the conversation is about, okay, I'm going to spend $20,000 this month or this quarter on ad spend, or I'm going to spend $50,000 this year. It doesn't work like that. It has to be spread out to 6 months minimum of ad spend to be able to recognize the outcome of that ad spend. And it is false to assume that with the money you're spending, you're actually buying clients. You're not. You're buying very raw, unqualified, disconnected numbers. This is all you're buying. But it's a skill set that turns all of those junk basically into valuable clients. So you have to have very persistent, organized fashion of getting a hold of these people. Sometimes it takes 4 emails, 6 texts, and 15 phone calls to get a hold of one of those leads and convert it to a client. So you can't do it on the side, and you got to be able to be organized to actually get the hold of these people and convert them to clients.
Yeah, I love that you're really pointing out that, going back to your kind of example, that a PI firm, they win $1 million case, you buy 50 billboards in your area, your phone's going to ring. But if you actually didn't think about how the organization runs, growth would be killed.
Right. And it's not always a lead generation or the ad campaign's fault. A lot of time is half of the fault is the firm not being able to handle the leads properly.
Yeah, that is actually a really good point, that almost advertising usually falls into some type of formula, that it is, if most lead generation companies, if you give them a certain budget, they are able to produce a kind of a range. It's kind of a guarantee on some level.
Right.
PJ, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, and so we'll get that poll. So when you are thinking about other ways to grow a law firm outside of traditional advertising where you're buying a lead, a referral network, what are some of the ways that people think about their referral network incorrectly, and how you suggest lawyers should really be approaching a referral network?
Sure. So I believe in any law practice, in the first 2 to 3 years, you basically need to just focus on your referral network. So every attorney that passes the bar or goes solo, the first thing that they do, they announce it to friends and families and colleagues that, look, I have a practice now, so please keep me in mind when you have a case. And they do that pretty nicely in the first couple of months, but then they stop and they are waiting for the cases to come in. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that the effort of getting this referral networks, first of all, is as competitive as anything else, because the same person that you just notified that you just passed your bar, you become an attorney, probably knows another 10 people who did so too. So it makes it very competitive referrals anyway. So just telling them is not good enough. Following up and continuing that effort of building a network is almost is like a school after finishing the school, is that you have to dedicate a certain amount of time, just like you would do money, and say, I'm going to spend 10 hours a week on just referral network. Mm-hmm. I'm going to call every attorney in the state, anybody who I ever be in contact with, building a huge LinkedIn presence. I can't emphasize enough on building your LinkedIn connections, because you know who you're connecting to. It's not a random thing. You can be selective who you're connecting to, and you can never have enough connection in LinkedIn. So if you're living in the state of California and you want to connect to the attorneys. You have a choice of, I don't know, 50, 100,000 attorneys that you can connect to. And then you can go to their profile, you can go to their website, you can check them out. And then after you're connected, you can start contacting them and say, can we have a 10 minutes conversation? And usually attorney to attorney conversations like this, it happens very often. They don't necessarily just refuse the connection. And you start hitting them up for, look, I know your employment or wages and hourly or personal injury, whatever. If you have a cases that you don't think your firm likes to handle, I'd be happy to do that. And I'll be very generous with the referral fees. And start marketing instead of spending $10,000 trying to buy one of those 100 leads that I just told you about that you got to hunt for your 5% out of that. If you spend that kind of resources on building organic referral network to sort of start up the flow of having cases, you'll be much happier and you will save a lot of money. But it has to be organized, consistent, and dedicated number of hours a week, just like you're having a second job to apply to this task. Okay.
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
So that's building that. And it really doesn't stop. And when your firm gets bigger and bigger, you have to give that assignment to somebody like a virtual staff that we'll talk about later on this conversation, who will do exact same thing that you started with the same philosophy, because that referral network can grow on basically unlimited. And a lot of people stop and they don't do it continuously. I actually, from my own practice, I set up somebody, a virtual staff for myself, who basically adds 1,000 attorney contacts to my LinkedIn a year. So I'm like at 3,000 contacts already, and I don't do anything about it anymore, other than just growing it. But you can do that very inexpensively, and it's the best way you can spend your money. So when you do that, and now you are basically exposed to the thousands of attorneys. So what do? They immediately come and check your website. They come and check your online presence, and they say, okay, who is this guy? What is this guy doing? What kind of a practice he has? What kind of a reputation he has? Because again, they want to trust you with their case or their client or whatever. So now that makes your online presence important, because not all online presence is for lead generation. It's for validating who you are. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I'm sort of in the middle with the social media, but it's not becoming a necessity to have a very professional, engaging, informative online presence, both for your existing clients, your prospect clients, and your referral networks. They're not going to call you and spend 2 hours with you checking you out, but they spend 10 minutes on your social media to basically serve the same purpose of spending 2 or 3 hours with you. And they do that in 10 minutes on your social media.
What is that I think that you bring up such an interesting point, Hamid, that, I'm sure that you hear a lot of young attorneys say back, why would someone refer me a case if they don't know me? And we are so trained to think that, in the old days, it would have been going to, Rotary clubs and Toastmasters to actually get into this community to build the relationship. And so this referral network doesn't necessarily have to have this deep relationship, it sounds like.
No, it doesn't, because one, they know you're a licensed attorney. That itself is credibility and validation. Then they see some client testimonials and they see your social media postings. So after spending like you would do or anybody else does when they want to go check somebody out, they want to see how real you are, how goofy you are, or how serious you are, and what kind of a practice you're running. And all of that can be pretty much summarized from your online presence.
Right. And I think that the biggest thing that you said that I want to point out to our participants is it's the continual asking. It's the system that it's within. It has to be into your daily habits or weekly habits that you're consistently checking in the same way that you're consistently checking your Google pay-per-click to see if they're producing leads.
Exactly. I'll give you another perfect example for that. It's like you go and buy 100 leads that you spend $10,000 on. that you want to get 5 out of the 100 out of that. Okay. And you spend $10,000 on it. So it's very important to get your 5 clients out of those 100 leads. So imagine, take the same thing and go on the referral network on the LinkedIn account or whatever, and you contact 100 attorneys. And let's say 5 of them actually refer a case to you. You achieve the same thing, more long-term, more professional, and 0 cost to you, actually hard cost. You didn't pay the 10,000, but you still got your 5 cases, but you reached out to 100 attorneys to get those 5, but you just saved the money and not to do it, and you spend it, elsewhere. But it has to be consistent and organized and continuous to be able to pay back. Everything that you do in marketing, lead generations, branding, networking, all of these areas only pays off when it's continuous and is organized. You can't just burst and say, okay, I'm really desperate. I have a lot of time this weekend. I'm going to connect to 100 people. And then you stop for another 4 months until you find another weekend that you don't have anything to do. It can't be like that. It has to be continuous.
No, you're right. And once you're in, people were creatures of habit. Once they know that they can trust you, you're their name, and you're just going to get every case that comes across their desk, they're going to refer to you.
Right. Absolutely.
So what are untapped? How do you find untapped territories?
Untapped territories, for example, I'll give you some examples. Those of you who are familiar with the Google My Business or Google Screen, it came out in the past couple of years, is very effective. But what happens on the major metropolitan areas, everybody that goes and does Google My Business and Google Screen, and it worked for a lot of people who actually were involved in that process because the rotation was small. Everybody was getting calls and leads from the Google. So a lot of the smaller firms ended up not getting anything or not getting opportunity to actually participate. So we set them up to go and do the Google My Business or Google Screen in the smaller towns that the big firms skip. Big firms want big results, big numbers, so they focus. Like if you take California, for example, people will focus in San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Sacramento, and so forth. But there is like hundreds of other smaller cities like Chico, California, or Redding, or Marysville, all these other places where the big boys leave it behind. And if you go set up a simple virtual office in one of these areas, Google My Business, Google Screen, you're going to get what they have left behind, essentially, in the state. So that's one way of, hitting untapped territories. The other areas is that, like, I'll give you an example. One of the firms that I helped set up, I was a younger gentleman, had a hard time competing in the PI market in California. So I got him referred out to a few other firms who wanted to refer out slip and fall cases, which these people didn't want, and some city claims that they didn't want. And he started doing that, and he turned them into really good money, both for them and the referral source. Now his niche expertise for entire firm is like 90% slip and fall and very few, auto accidents, because he built the expertise and he's taking advantage of everybody else who doesn't want to be in it. So that's a niche market, like in the PI. Or sometimes on employment, for example, a lot of people don't want wages and hourly claims against very small businesses because the outcome is 3,000, 5,000, whatever. They don't want to deal with it. So you go after that. My recommendation for people trying to market or grow to expansion is don't follow what everybody and all the big firms are doing. Find out what they are not doing and do that. Because then you're constantly chasing the money, and you're chasing all of these folks who can afford to throw $1 million on some campaign, or, as you said, have hundreds of billboards up, and you always wish that you could have the money to put up the billboards. I never agree with that term. It's like, I don't want to be, following everybody. I want to find things that people will follow me later. So I don't want to have my picture on all these billboards. I think it's a waste of money. I can spend 1/10 of that and get the same result with 4 other creative marketing programs or campaigns. So that's why you find untapped territories. I had an amazing thing happened last week when I'm working with some, class action employment firms, and Supreme Court just passed a ruling last week against a case that basically wiped out PAGA cases, which is class action employment.
Mhm.
And a lot of these firms who were essentially making millions and millions, I know them and I know the books, they were making millions out of these cases, are going to be left behind because they need to pivot into something else. But I have a couple of these really smart attorneys who did exactly this that I'm coaching. They started pivoting into finding a way that other people don't know and they haven't tried and they're not doing. They didn't come back to me and say, actually they did. It says, so what is all these big firms going to do now that the PAGA is gone? And I said, I don't know. I don't care. Let's find out what they're not doing and we go do that, because we can't go spend $2 million on a new program or new campaign. So let's find out. And we did. We found a couple of different angles to approach the cases and not to be affected by the Supreme Court ruling.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting point about kind of when you're thinking about growing your practice. Do you think that as the legal industry requires attorneys to often find a niche, is it problematic to only focus on motor vehicle accidents, that lawyers need to be very careful about only doing really one type of law because of the example you just said, that there could be one sweeping change that wipes out your practice?
Sure. It should be one practice type at a time, but you got to find out, just like you would do business analysis. If you take the law concept into any other business environment, nobody operates like the law industry does. So for example, if these high-tech companies, if they don't, no new high-tech company is going to start up a laptop business because laptops are hot with Apple. It's like, okay, there are, but it's too late to the game. Cost of entry is too much. It's too competitive. And who the heck wants to compete with Apple? So no, I'm not. But in legal industry, it's not the case. It's like what you said. They see all of these announcements and settlements and awards and so forth, and they say millions of dollars and say, I'm having what he's having. But you have to figure out, one, can you afford it? Is it the right timing? Is it a growing market? Is the cost of client acquisition still in control? You have to look at all the factors before you say, I'm going to be doing this. Not just be attracted with what's in the media. This guy got a $20 million verdict. I'm going to get one of those. He's not. You can't pick and choose what you're going to get. You got to see the numbers. What is the likelihood percentage of me being able to get one of those 8-figure? How long is going to take? How feasible it is? Is it 0.001% chance, or is it like a 6% chance? It's like buying a lottery. Not everybody buys going to get $100 million. You look at the odds, and if you look at the odds, a lot of people will stop buying lottery tickets because it says 0.0001% chance of winning.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, I don't want to do that. So anyway, so that's the way you choose your practice type.
What is your opinion about how should lawyers play around with pricing options? There's a company, I think it's Marble Law, where they almost contract with attorneys, and their pricing model is, if you only want this part of if you want the petition for divorce filed, you only have to pay $600, and if you want to continue, you pay another $500. And it is this to try to end the fear over the abstract of billable hours.
Sure. So there's a big difference between contingency practice versus a transactional practice.
Mm-hmm.
Transactional practice, you're talking about immigration, bankruptcy, estate planning, family law, all of this stuff, probate, all this stuff is pretty much transactional. I know there is some, legal activities that happens at some time, but if I look at the numbers, 85% of the cases are transactional. Transactional, if you're doing transactional, you got to do volume. You got to be priced right. Your target price have to be competitive, and your process has to be automated because you need to have great profit margins when you're doing transactional law. Because the pricing, I mean, people do estate planning for $998, and people are doing estate planning for $10,000. But if you want to do volume, you got to be price competitive. So to do that, if you choose to go transactional, you gotta create a machine, automated, high volume, good profit margin machine. Otherwise, your income will resemble that if you're working for a firm, you almost have a fixed income, with certain growth, but not a lot. If you don't automate, streamline, and control cost of the client and profit margins.
And do you think that would you also share the advice that you can't, in terms of growth, do you do a kitchen sink? Do you throw it all? Or how measured, how calculated do you do? You can't rely just on referrals. You can't rely just on Google. How do you know when to do what?
Well, it's almost like you got to pick all the low-hanging fruits first. And the low-hanging fruits are those things that I mentioned: referral networks, a strong social media, content, testimonials, reviews, all that stuff. To me, that's the low-hanging fruit because it's not going to cost you a lot of money. It's not a lot of risk to be ripped off. Okay. And after that, then you have to be able to have sort of like a war chest to say, okay, and however you got it, I said, I have $30,000 that I'm going to spend on my practice. And how am I going to spend it? I usually diversify that between 2 or 3 different programs of lead generations to say, okay, the secondary route is to split up this $30,000 to 3 to 6 months of a campaign for 2 separate campaigns. And I'm going to watch it like a hawk to make sure I get my good ROI out of it. So I'm not saying don't advertise, don't do lead generation. I'm saying that pick the low-hanging fruits first, then very manageable, very controlled, spend money on growing your practice.
And that leads into when you're talking about growth strategies and growing a practice, is a strategy, can you cut your way to growth? Can you go so lean in your operating expenses that you actually spark growth?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think nowadays there's more opportunities to cut costs than it is opportunities to grow your practice.
Wow.
And that's what I mentioned about, automation. You cannot have enough automation. The biggest bang I've seen from especially transactional practices, you can automate the heck out of things. I mean, to the point of intake, information collection, document collection, filing of the applications. You can automate a lot of that. And then on top of that, it comes to staffing. I have a layout of a virtual law firm, which consists of 1 attorney, 1 intake person, 1 case manager, 1 legal assistant, and 1 person who does document collections and more admin work. The entire structure is virtual staffing with 1 attorney, 4 staff law firm. With the attorney makes it a 5 staff law firm, that the monthly cost of staffing is less than $9,000 a month.
Wow.
Okay, so you're basically looking at $100,000 a year investment in the firm that has 5 staff. And we have implemented that, and it's very successful. It's a new modern virtual practice setup. And we've done it, we know how to do it, we've seen it. It's very doable. You can do it, and you don't need to have the office space and all the benefits and all the taxes and all the IT expenses, but you can run a virtual law firm. And I even had the situation where in a traditional law firm who expanded into a different practice type, let's say it was an employment law firm, and they wanted to do workers' comp. So instead of adding 5 more people to their existing staff, we set up in a virtual workers' comp law firm for the employment firm. With a $100,000 a year cost of staffing for the entire firm. So it's very doable, and that's one way that you reduce your cost of operation, and you get to spend that money onto marketing and advertising and social media and things like that.
Do you think law firms, if they're starting out and wanting to do this virtual model, because it obviously is the wave of the future, how do you think do clients still want to meet with their lawyer face to face, or do you think post-COVID Zoom is enough?
I don't see any reason why the client wants to. I mean, the only time they want to see them really is on depositions or mediations, when all of those is happening in Zoom too. Mm-hmm. I go to these law firms physically that are 100 staff law firm. And I ask a receptionist, I do a lot of data surveys. Mm-hmm. I said, how many clients in the week actually come here? And she looked at me like, clients? I'm saying, because not much at all. A lot of vendors come, and a lot of people come wanting to ask information, but clients don't want to come. We actually sometimes even to pick up a big check, they don't want to come. I mean, they have like a $100,000 settlement check, and they say, "Can you just put it in the mail for me?" I mean, they don't even want to come up. So why the heck do we want to come talk to the attorney, which or the case manager, especially nowadays with COVID, with Zoom, with cost of gas, just the traffic, nobody wants to do stuff. So having the big, nice office facility you can meet and greet clients is not the thing anymore.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, obviously there's for those law firms that are existing, they have a unique opportunity to transition and put a lot of cash back in their operating by getting rid of commercial space that they've been paying for 10 years, 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much commercial space available right now, and the virtual meeting places and those temporary executive offices that people can rent by the hour, by the day. It's so inexpensive, nice professional conference rooms that you only use it as needed basis. They put your name up on the front lobby, so everybody thinks that's your building, is your office, and all of that. And all you done, you pay them $120 for a meeting place. So you can utilize a lot of different non-traditional resources to look big, act big, but reduce the cost into 25 cents on the dollar when you're looking at your expenses.
So that is similar to when someone owns one really great restaurant and they want to open up a second location. Going 1 to 2 is not as hard as people think, but going from 2 to 5 is extremely difficult. It seems to me that in my career talking to people, opening up that second location of your law firm becomes so hard for lawyers. How do law firms really, one, know when is it time to open up a San Francisco office or go from, if you're in Dallas, to Houston? When do you know, and how do you really set it up to do it right?
Everybody I work with usually just does the virtual offices. All they want to do is basically show the client that we have a local presence, which is essentially just a phone number and address in one of these executive buildings. Or there's only second person purpose of it is a Google My Business kind of an initiative. I don't hardly seen any of my attorneys wanting to go and open up a whole brand new office put furniture in it, put IT stuff in there, long-term leases. I mean, um, honestly, in the past 3 years, 4 years, I haven't had one of those cases where somebody wanted to do this.
Yeah. I guess a piggyback on that is expansion to other cities is a growth model, because there is a plateau period within the market share of your primary city that maybe you started in. Is that true?
Yes, you want to be a statewide. If anything, you want to be multi-state, but that doesn't mean I'm going to need an office building or office space in every one of the cities. You want just your name and the smallest virtual office location you can get, and that's it. You don't.
Yeah.
You can do the entire state if you want to. I have firms who is like a 6-people firm, and they show on their website that they are present in like 14 cities within the state.
I think that it's funny is that you say that, and I feel like you probably a small firm or a solo practitioner, to them, especially in California, they probably just immediately say, well, how can I be in Sacramento? I live in LA. What if I have to go to court?
Right. They, traveling and the court appearances and so forth are much easier than used to within the state. And the only purpose of having a multi-location state is just making the client feel comfortable that you're actually local. You probably never see these clients in person. With transactional law, for sure you don't. I have one of my clients is one of the largest immigration firm in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And he has in his network of attorneys that he works with and they work on his cases, he has over 25 attorneys. His office is a 2-people office that he never goes to. And everybody will look at him online or his website or whatever. They think that he has offices in every state, because he's immigration. But he doesn't have even one over there. But it appears to be just to make a client feel comfortable. But immigration, nobody goes to office. Go to office to say what? They're just collecting information, filing application, and submitting, e-filing the applications, immigration application. So why does he need the office?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I'm curious, Hamid, so a lot of the big law firms, your downtown law firms, their growth model seems to be, you develop your partners, and you basically say to the partners, if you're going to get an equity share, you got to be driving some major revenue. So go out and drive revenue, and then you get a piece of the pie. Is that the most effective way, or do you think that there's smarter ways without having to always drive revenue linked to hiring more attorneys that you now have to worry about feeding?
No, instead of hiring attorneys to give them a share or a piece of the pie, you just need some great marketing and lead generation staff or third party to do it, and you don't have to give them a share of the firm either. I mean, what is those attorneys going to do to generate the revenue? They're going to bring a lead or a client. Well,
right.
I can get one of my virtual marketing staff to do that, and I don't have to give them a piece of the company. So that's a very, very old-fashioned way, and that's only works on the very high-end corporate environment where you have corporate clients like Google or Microsoft or Facebook as your client, and it needs a senior partner graduated from Harvard who's going to go in and schmooze and get him as a client. That's not our target market. That's not the kind of firms we work with. And that still exists, but is not in the streamline of every other practice that we're dealing with.
Yeah. No, well, I think the reason why I brought it up is because I think that oftentimes law school frames for lawyers that's how you're supposed to operate. And I think that's so innovative about LegalSoft. If you want to share how legal reps, how you really coached that he transitioned from really being a full-time lawyer and now is probably making more than he did as a lawyer.
Absolutely. Even from having like a 300 case law firm to 1,000 case law firm with 2 staff and 8 virtual staff, and basically make more money, a lot less headache. And he's actually now, leasing his office space out because he let go of so many people. At one hand, adding a whole bunch of clients, and on the other hand, reducing your headcount to almost zero. So yeah, there's a lot of innovative, creative ways to build and grow a practice, but you just have to think outside the box. You have to be very open into virtual staff, virtual resources, technologies, automations, and so forth to be able to get there. Paul, you want to open up to the questions?
Yes, let's do that. We'll pause. If anyone has a question, use the raise hand feature, and we will call your name, and then you can ask Hamid your question directly. Nobody? Everyone's making, okay. Adrianos.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Paul. Very interesting presentation. I have actually one of the VAs that's working with my firm from your company, and she's an absolute rock star. So she's great. And I have been using her for some marketing stuff, but I have a PI practice. I have a very kind of focused question, assuming, hypothetically speaking, that I adopted the model you suggest, which is a virtual law firm completely. One of my main concerns is, with on-site employees that are here in the United States, I can create that personal relationship with them such that they stay, multiple years. I have one staff member who's been with me 9 years, one staff member who's been 7 years. My main concern with having a virtual firm completely is making sure there's not a high turnover rate, right? So right. What are some strategies? What are some things that, what sort of, I'm sure it's a common objection for you guys. So how do you guys deal with that? How do you think about that?
It's a great question. And by the way, thank you for being a client. It's a great question. It is because you have virtual staffing doesn't mean that you're going to treat them differently. The reason you have your staff in your office loyal and long-term is because you said yourself, you made a connection with them. You took care of them. You compensated them properly. You created a work environment that they ought to be in. So you took all of those efforts. That's why they're there. They're just out of coincidence. You made it for them to be there and want to be there. You do the same thing with virtual staff, and they'd be actually more grateful and more committed that you're in-house when you're taking care of them. They're not ignored. They're not treated as an outsider. They're not treated as a remote or virtual. They're treated as a complete integrated part of the practice. So for example, when I have one PI firm in California who has 39 VAs, which is unheard of. I don't know what they do with them. A pretty tough, rough running firm. But their clients are staying, their VAs are staying with them such a long term that it even surprises me. But they treat them like other members of the team. If they have an event, they invite them in on the Zoom to have a Thanksgiving lunch party, or during Christmas time or the holidays, whatever. They treat them like that, and they keep them. And they give them incentives once in a while. They give them bonuses, they give them holiday gifts and things like that. They stick around for a very long time.
I also would want to add that too is, Adrianos, there's something to think about too, that you can have a shift in focus of a very, very high performing American team that is very close knit, and there's parts of a practice that consistently shuffle for everyone. And so, you always want to build culture, but you don't need to always have, and I think in a modern time, you don't have to think of your law firm of having this 30-member family team. You can have a 10-member team that's producing, the same results because it's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it, at least up until now. For paralegal work, higher level work, I'll have, people who are here in California, where I am in LA. And then obviously for lower level tasks, I like the idea of using VAs. Just makes perfect sense to me.
Adrianus, what a high level. I mean, Paul himself just launched a program where he basically took virtual staff who are law school graduates overseas and train them to be demand writers.
Mm-hmm.
For the cost that, I think the cost per demand, once you have one of these demand writers, is almost like $30 per demand. And you can get a whole bunch of these demands out, the PI demands, especially when you're doing pre-lit and you're doing, 1530 policies in California, whatever. So you'll be surprised. I have class action employment firm using a VA to do discovery for employment cases.
Mm-hmm.
So damn, if they can do that, they can definitely do case management for pre-lit PI.
Makes sense. All right, thanks for answering the question.
Sure. So don't minimize what they can do. Give them opportunity to do everything you want them to do, and let them prove it to you that they can.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for answering the question.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anybody else have a question about, their growth shifting? What is Hamid, what is a habit? We do have a in the chat. Let's answer this from Husna. That is, if you can touch on security issues with VAs.
Sure. We get this question all the time. First of all, you're hiring the VAs through us. We are a US-based company. We have all the insurances and security measures in place. We have professional liability insurance. We have all kinds of insurances that you can imagine, probably overinsured. That's the first one. The second one is that what kind of a securities, this is the question I always ask people, is that what kind of a security thing do you have about the employees in your office?
Mm-hmm.
They have access to everything. They have access to all of client information, social securities, credit cards, addresses, phone numbers. And I bet you there is no security measure in place where you are preventing them to do something with that information. It's the same thing with the VAs. First of all, virtual staff has a lot less interest to do this kind of things because they're focused, very grateful to have a job. And we do a lot of screening. We do a screen capture on their system every 15 minutes. We check every URL that they go to during the day. We manage their attendance, and we record their conversations. If you could do that with your in-house staff, you probably get in trouble with law. But we can do that because they're overseas, and we have the rights. So to answer that, it's a valid question to worry about security, but it should not be focused on just a virtual staff security. It should be your entire firm security.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is, and culturally, what you said is that it just isn't. Their mindset isn't looking to take advantage. It's just not. It's not the same culture as American culture, crime, and in a lot of these other countries.
The biggest theft I've seen in my career in this area is being with PI firms who have case managers or receptionists who've been stealing cases from the firm. So they get this call in on this 7-8 figure case, and they're routing it to somewhere else. I actually caught a few of this myself on the local firms on the PI side, where the staff were the biggest leak for losing cases.
Eric Blank has a question for us too. So Eric, if you want to come in and ask that question, ask your question.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I was just curious, and I didn't catch the beginning part, so if you mentioned this, I apologize. What about the scheduling? How does that kind of work? I mean, different, obviously we're on different time. Is it kind of you do something one day and you're hearing back the next day? Are they working on the time frames you're on? How's that work?
They do they do whatever schedule that you assign. So if you want them to be there during your time, you say, I'm operating 9 to 5, PST time or East Coast time or whatever, they will attend that exact hours. A lot of the firms that we work with, they begin with the regular work hours that they have. And then when they expand, they want to have weekend coverage on the intake, they want night coverage, holiday coverage, then they expand the VAs to work all of those hours. They work on any given schedule that you like. And to also control some of that, I have the firms who have like 5 virtual staff, from intake to case managers to document collection, and they have them the whole 8 hours on the Zoom on their screen. It looks like they're all sitting right around the desk near them. And they are muted, they're doing their work, but if you have a question, you go, hey, Barbara, did you take care of this client? Did you call that lead? Did you collected that document? And they get the answer and then they mute. It's almost like all of you living in the same room. And even when they go to lunch, they say, is it okay if I take my lunch right now, John? Okay, thank you. And they log out for 30 minutes and log back in. It's like leaving the office and coming back in. It is so much more convenient and real time and practical than actually people being in the office.
And the as far as setting the parameters, if there's a disciplining or getting them corrected, does that work through your office? Do you do that directly? How does that work?
It works both ways. If, for example, you have what we call the success manager that works with your firm. So this is a person to make sure you're having a great experience with the VA. Our staff manage their attendance, making sure they have perfect attendance. And when they do, we bonus them on our own for having a perfect attendance. Then they check their performance with you. If you give them a 5-star on your end, that this person, like the other caller was talking about, is great, we give them an incentive, we give them a bonus. We give them health insurance when they stay with us for 6 months or more. If they stay for 1 year, we get their family health insurance. We take care of them many different ways to make sure. And if you don't like the performance of your virtual staff, we replace them, we onboard them, we put them back on there for you. If you need to do corrective actions, if you want to do it directly, you can. If you want to use our staff to do it, we do that too. We are with you along the way to make sure you're satisfied with your staffing and you're going to expand on your staffing. Our average number of VAs per law firm is 3.5 staff per firm. So most people expand on their usage of the virtual staffing.
Also, Eric, I don't know if you have remote employees now, but one of the things of working with us is that the technology of when you have a remote employee, you're almost forced to make videos to show them how to do stuff. And then all of a sudden you have built-in training that they're not making very many mistakes because you've mitigated it because they have a video reference to go back and look at what you want them to do every single time.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we've had people at times work remote who've gotten COVID or things like that, but we've not had a full-time or remote worker. So.
But I think you would be greatly impressed once you start working with the virtual staff and how exactly they follow the instructions, they follow your guidance, they finish the task, they report right back to you, their attendance, them being engaged. I think you will be pleasantly surprised.
Sure. Okay. I got you. All right. Thank you.
Sure. You had another question, Paul.
Does someone else have another question? Is that what you said, Hamid?
Yeah, I think somebody asked, somebody mentioned that I really like that the LegalSoft offers the initial video of each potential VA prior to the meeting, which allow you to choose who you want. Absolutely. Not only we do, we screen, we select, we onboard, we pre-train. We also have them do a short video that we present on the site. And when they want to do the interview, we select 3 or 4 or 5 different candidates for you to simultaneously, like 15 minutes each, to interview them and select who you want. And then we take a few days to do the onboarding with them. So that's always available. Thank you for that.
Yes. Before we go and before we depart, I wanted to open up. We can do one more question if someone has any last minute question, and then I have one last question for you, Hamid.
Sure.
Okay. So if you were to give, if you, and it might be hard to pigeonhole this, but the question would be, what is your single best advice in terms of what habit a lawyer can develop to create a growth mindset or a growth firm?
Treating your practice as a business is to have a business plan, have a budget, have executable actions, and be persistent and organized about it, and not doing things ad hoc, like spending money on things without a plan, hiring people or not hiring people. I see the problem both ways. They either overstaff or understaff because it's not on the plan. I have a rule, like, for example, for personal injury, every case manager can handle 80 to 95 PI cases individually. If you're giving them 150, is too much. You're leaving money on the table. If you're giving them 50, they're underworked. So, but if you go by the plan, every time you add 90 cases to your firm, you hire a case manager, great. It all works out. It's a nice layout. So being organized, having a plan, executing your plan, have a budget in place.
Yeah, that is great. That's great advice. PJ, if you can, we go to the last slide. We thank everyone for joining us, and as a gift for participating, Hamid has generously decided to give everyone who participated today a free mobile app. So we will contact you tomorrow. Mobile apps are changing how law firms are communicating with clients, collecting documents. It actually is encrypted, and so you have more streamlined protection over communication. So we are excited to share what we can build with you guys, and we hope to continue to partner with you as you all continue to grow your practice. So thank you, Hamid.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.